Hello again and Merry Christmas to all who celebrate, or Happy Holidays, whatever it is that you're celebrating this year, whether it is Christmas or just extra time off for those of you who have that. But I'm here today for a little off the cuff video, just kind of discussing a very interesting trope within the Beauty and the Beast genre, I guess we'll call it, or theming. I'm sure I'll finalize the wording. Like I said, this is off the cuff, so if I'm a little bit redundant or I need to add some things in post, please bear with me. But I wanted to talk about Beauty and the Beast again. This is another within our series, and about one of the tropes within this story. And I think it's very relevant because recently we've had so many lovely gothic movies come out that also operate within this trope. So I guess let's get into what is this trope that we're seeing. So as you may recall from my last video, we have three primary versions of Beauty and the Beast literarily that we have to consider when we're speaking about it. The first, of course, being the Villeneuve version, which was published in the mid-18th century. Then there's the Beaumont version, which comes out later that century. I believe it was about 10 years after. And then finally, the Andrew Lang version from the Blue Fairy book, which was just a cut version of the Villeneuve version. So it's like 2.5 versions, really. But anyways, this trope that I'm talking about, which becomes relevant especially in modern interpretations, because as I mentioned, modern books, you really don't need much of anything for it to be considered a Beauty and the Beast story. You need a beastly lead and honestly, just a female lead at that point. And we'll get into that here. The thing I want to talk about, I saw primarily in Beaumont's version, the one that was published about 10 years after Villeneuve's. And that is the othering of the female lead. And I think this is really interesting, especially, like I said, in modern versions, because we see this in modern versions where all we need is a female lead and a male beastly lead, and there is a reason for that. And briefly, as briefly as I can, I think that this is due to the othering of women. And you know, I'm somebody who spent a lot of time in male-dominated spaces. You know, I fight, I have worked jobs that were male-dominated. I mainly grew up at a Boy Scout camp, actually. Fun fact, I was a registered Boy Scout at the age of 17. And so I've spent a lot of time in male-dominated spaces. And I think it's a very universal female experience that when you're in one of these spaces, you find yourself standing at the edge. You find yourself trying to advocate for yourself and finding that you cannot, frankly. You will always be fighting a battle to be seen as a member of the group. And when we see these Beauty and the Beast type stories, especially in the modern day, you know, a lot of people start asking questions about attraction. I think Frankenstein, especially the new Guillermo del Toro version that recently came out, is a fantastic example of this, where our female lead, you know, she's very into bugs and she has a very intricate mind, and people would ask, why would a woman, especially a beautiful woman, where you think that vanity would be an especially big part of it, would be romantically interested in a monstrous male character? And in these stories, the monster is the other, the somebody who can relate to the woman in that sense of being put on the edges, the fringes of society. Now, where does this come from? To circle back to our source material here. And that is from the Beaumont version. Now, I think it's pretty commonly known, if you've done anything deeper than the Disney Beauty and the Beast, that in the written versions of Beauty and the Beast, Belle, we'll just call her Belle because that's what she's called in the movie and that's what the name translates to. She is the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and his ships are lost at sea, and they lose all their fortune and all their money. And so they end up having to move to a countryside house, and this is where this divisive othering starts to happen. And you see this primarily again in the Beaumont version. In the story, it depends on which version you read how many siblings Beauty has. But she always does have sisters in the literary versions. And these sisters act in the same way that they do in East the Sun, West the Moon, or Cupid and Psyche, these classical versions, the lost husband tropes, as we spoke about before. But they, and quite honestly, I think the original intent was rather not wholesome. I think there was probably some sexism involved here, but we'll get into that once we get into a video about the origins and the ancient roots of this story type and the lost husband myth as a whole. But in Beauty and the Beast, she has two sisters, typically. And when they move out to this countryside cottage, that is when Beauty ends up being othered by her sisters primarily. And you know, as the youngest, maybe she's just more easily adapted to a new lifestyle. But in Beaumont's version, she specifically says that the sisters are very dour. They're very upset about being moved to the countryside. They've lost their fortune. They can no longer afford beautiful dresses, and they're very distraught over this situation, which is admittedly pretty natural in that scenario, I would think. But they get very annoyed at Beauty because she's cheery and she is trying to keep people's spirits up, and she's going out to see to her brothers and her father, and she's dancing and she's singing and she's trying to keep good spirits, and she's just very naturally kind-hearted. And you know, this also comes into this idea of female competition, which is just universal at this point. You know, we see it with like the girl mom or the boy mom trope, where the woman has this like Freudian hatred for her daughter, this need for women to constantly compete with each other. So we see some very interesting dynamics that have modern day repercussions, and we see this echoed in this story. So you might remember primarily our cultural norm of the Disney Beauty and the Beast. Belle is a funny girl, is how they describe it, to be, you know, polite. And of course, Belle loves to read books and loves to, you know, learn, and she's always got her head up in some cloud, as the song goes. So Belle is again othered in that way. And so we see in Beauty and the Beast this commonality. The Beast is physically different. You know, we also see this in like Hunchback of Notre Dame. Quasi is quite literally half-formed. He is deformed. And, you know, Esmeralda, she is from a people group which lives on the fringes of society, and therefore she is also othered. Her beauty, while it is useful to her, is something that makes her more acceptable, more palatable to the common people and the public. So whenever you see this, you really see it in basically any Beauty and the Beast story. And we also see this in, you don't see it as much as in, like, I know Dracula is another one of our very nice Beauty and the Beast type stories that doesn't really have that, but we see it frequently enough to know that it is a primary theme. So that's where it comes from, is the Beaumont version of Beauty and the Beast. And now, I think this also comes with the caveat of, in stories with fairies, especially from the 19th century, where they had this huge morality crisis, basically, there's usually a moral, you know, at the end of it. Belle was very beautiful, but mostly she was kind and she was cheerful, and this is why she is the one who is worthy to marry the prince and get the castle and the servants and have this beautiful life. And she was the one ultimately able to, you know, in some versions, see past his physical appearance and see the person inside. Highly dependent on the version that you see or read, I suppose. But in the Beaumont version, there is a direct consequence. In some of these literary versions of Beauty and the Beast, that's now leaking papers, these older sisters get turned to stone and are made to be statues in front of her castle, which is very disturbing. I like to think that in that version of Beauty and the Beast, that because Beauty is kind, that she would feel very sorry for her sisters. One of my favorite, it's actually right here, one of my favorite stories from when I was a kid was Gail Carson Levine's The Fairy Returns and Other Princess Tales. I read this so much as a child. And a lot of the themes in this book that I thought that she played with very well in all these sub-stories within this book was that the princesses and the heroines of these stories are also victims of the fairies. The fairies are very well intended, but often don't exactly pull things off the right way. They see things in black and white and ends up hurting a lot of people as much as it benefits them. So I like to think in Beaumont's version of Beauty and the Beast, because she is kind, she probably feels very sorry for her sisters at the end. Because as much as I fight with my sisters, I probably wouldn't want to see them turn to stone statues either. But that is where the othering trope comes from. And again, we see this a lot in a lot of Del Toro films. I think he quite likes this trope. And I think it's very relatable. I think this is part of why Beauty and the Beast is such a well-loved story, especially in the Disney version, because they make it so explicit, where she is other. She is apart from her society. She doesn't fit in. She wants somebody to talk to. And I think a lot of us either have been there or are there. I mean, I had to create a whole YouTube channel just to yap about all these stories because I have so many thoughts on them. But so that's a little look into this trope, I suppose. And I so deeply appreciate the love that my first video has gotten already, especially my friends in real life who have, put in so much effort into something that has given me so much anxiety. And especially those of you who don't know me and you just happened upon me, and that is such a great thing. If you don't know me, please feel free to find my Instagram at the Willow Archive, currently the same name as my YouTube channel. I don't like the name entirely, actually, so that may change in the future. I just haven't thought of anything better. But if you would stick around and have any ideas or questions or want to start a dialogue, please let me know. I'm going to try to be a little bit more active on the comments here. I so appreciate your support, so thank you so much again for sticking around, and hopefully I'll be able to elaborate about all of this in a future video. I just wanted to touch on the trope because it's on my mind right now. So I hope you guys have a lovely Christmas, a lovely day, and come back and we'll talk about it more. So bye.